You are listening to the Mark Guzman Podcast Experience. In this episode, we talk with Rosie the Riveter Trust about the history of Rosie and their upcoming Rosie Rally Festival to break the Guinness World Record. I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I know you guys are really busy with the upcoming rally, and definitely appreciate the time to do this for you guys to be on this podcast. And so why don't we get right into it? I believe this is the third year it's being done, correct? The rally?
Yes, it is. It was a great event. We started a couple of years back. There was a previous Homefront Festival, but we did not have the Rosie Rally until 3 years ago when we decided we wanted to take on Michigan and see if we could compete with them to win the Guinness record.
Okay. And you broke that record, was it last year or the year before?
We broke it both years, and we have this friendly competition now with the folks in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And so they basically took it back from us, and we took it back again, and now I think they're scheming on trying to take it from us in the future.
Well, I'm sure it's a very fun and exciting rivalry right there.
It is, and it's actually been, there's a lot of goodwill, I think, on both sides, and they are trying to restore a bomber plant back there, and we, of course, are trying to build visibility for the park and let people know what we do and let them learn a little bit about this history. So it works well for all of us.
Yeah, and just up until a few years ago, I did not realize that you guys are located in Richmond.
Oh, yes, we are. Yeah, we are actually the flagship park for telling the National Homefront story during World War II. And that is really because Richmond has more intact buildings than any other site in the country.
That's amazing. That's a very amazing fact there. So who were the original Rosie the Riveters?
Well, you know, it's interesting because what everyone knows is the iconic image of the Rosie with her headscarf on and with her arm raised and her blue uniform. But in actual fact, that was a recruiting poster. And so people across the country were trying to recruit women and people who weren't going to war, men as well, to try to come into the war industries because there just weren't enough people to do the job. And as it turned out, there were lots of people who were what we tend to think of as more traditional housewives who were at home, who decided to come to work and try to really work on behalf of the country and support all the troops overseas. But there were a lot of women, too, who were basically working kind of substandard jobs. A lot of them were domestics, or they were people doing other field work. A lot of them were farm workers, and they really wanted to build a career. They wanted better lives for themselves and their children and their families. And so it was just an amazingly diverse group of people who actually went to work during that period on the home front. The Rosies themselves were women, traditionally identified as women, but there were also a lot of people who fit other roles. There were men who were too old to go to war, people who were disabled, and all kinds of folks, because basically every single citizen was needed in that effort.
Wow, amazing. And how were people recruited? Or was it one of those things where everyone just knew how many people were going over to fight overseas and they just rallied up together and just did it themselves?
No, I think that, you know, the war industries were gearing up. There were all kinds of them. It wasn't just riveting airplanes. It was welding ships here in Richmond and, you know, many different types of industries gearing up for different kinds of supply. And so I think that each group or each factory began to try to recruit on its own. There was a war board effort to try to recruit, and that's where the recruiting poster came from. And then people like Henry Kaiser here in Richmond basically were tapped by FDR he was tapped in particular to build ships faster than the enemy could sink them. And so he began to try to recruit people from all over the country. And that's really what transformed Richmond. This town was about, I think, 23,000 people, and overnight it became a city of 123,000 people.
Wow. When did the image come about? Was that something they planned ahead of time to really do a lot of recruiting, or did they see a trend with women signing up and they decided to create this image in the posters?
You know, I don't really know the details about how the image came into being. I'm afraid I'm not a historical expert, but I do, you know, it was part of that overall effort. There were efforts on all fronts. You know, there were people who were basically trying to get everyone to recycle all their materials. A lot of these things that we think of as fairly new were actually not new. They were commonplace during World War II out of necessity. So there were efforts on every possible front to try to support the troops, to try to build the war industries, to try to supply the kinds of materials that were in short supply. Rubber tires. Women didn't have stockings. Their nylon was needed for parachutes. So everybody pitched in some way trying to make that war effort happen, and it extended well beyond the wartime industries because people were doing things on the home front to try to make the country more successful, like growing and canning their own food so that they weren't a drain on the kinds of food that were needed to send overseas for the troops. For instance, there were multiple efforts, and it was just I tend to think of it as a slow crescendo as the war became more intense and people really began pitching in every way they could possibly think of.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you think the image of women has changed because of this?
Oh, I think it's completely amazing just from everything that I've read about this history and what I know. I myself am sort of a product of the 60s and the feminist movement, and probably thought that we invented that because I didn't know my history well enough at the time. But I really, these women were remarkable in terms of what they did because there were very few women at that time who were in these kinds of skilled jobs. And it was not only something they did out of patriotic dedication, but it was also, living up to an amazing challenge. So they took on jobs that were traditionally men's jobs, and a lot of them were tough, dangerous, hard jobs. When you talk to the Rosie docents that we have here at the National Park, it's quite interesting to hear what a daily work site was like for them, and what it was like to have to deal with hot metal and injuries and all of the other kinds of things they endured. But I think what's really come out of that is that women gained skilled jobs in mass for the first time. Many workplaces were really more integrated as a consequence of this. And even though it was considered very strange at first, there were people escorting women around the workplace for fear that they would be assaulted in some cases.
Wow.
It changed the entire nature of the workplace. Women were much more accepted, and even though a lot of them went home after the war, they came back. They went home. They tried to support people coming home, the men who came home and needed jobs. But ultimately, they went back to work again, and then the next generation of people like my generation really took off and saw that that was a model that we could follow, I think, and it's been changing ever since.
Yeah, and I think that was definitely, and I totally agree with you, a pivotal point in the history of the U.S. that many women stayed working.
Yeah, they did. And many of them had it to go back, actually, to substandard jobs afterwards because they really were kind of pushed out of the skilled jobs. But others found, and I know one, for instance, I'm thinking of who went back to work in a cannery job after the war, and she was a skilled welder, top certification. And then there were others who managed to translate their skills gradually into other kinds of jobs. There was a woman who was one of our docents who was an electrician, and she had very fine motor skills, was great with her hands, and she ended up working in the electronics industry on circuitry. But she had to kind of work her way into that after the war because they were basically, most of the women were discouraged from continuing the jobs and sometimes more than forcibly encouraged to go home and not to take up that space.
hmm During World War II, they did a variety of jobs, not just in factories, correct?
Yeah, they definitely did many kinds of jobs. There were women flying planes, actually. I mean, there were women pilots. A lot of them, or at least some of them that I've read about, were definitely not flying combat, but they were flying cargo, or they were flying planes around the country to deliver them to Air Force bases where they were then sent overseas, for instance. There were, those were women who were in more traditional military-oriented careers, but there were people doing every possible kind of work because they just had to. The men weren't here.
hmm and so it was very interesting. Like I didn't know that Rosie's also included men that were too old to fight, and that was very interesting. I didn't even know that. That's something that you really don't hear very often.
No, you don't. And I think, even disabled people in the workplace, it was fairly new at that time for disabled people to be able to be in a workplace with other folks. It wasn't the norm at all. But because everyone was needed, that happened. We have a couple of docents at the park who were men who stayed home, one of whom was in what was considered a critical industry. He was a boat builder. So he was, and that was true of, I think, a number of men in various fields, lots of different fields where they were considered members of critical industries, and they stayed home and worked on the home front. So we, instead of calling them Rosies, we call them Rogers at the park.
Why don't we go ahead and talk about the park or the Homefront Visitor Center? Where is it located in Richmond?
It's located right down at the end of Harbor Way South. It's on the waterfront, right along San Francisco Bay. But the park itself is interesting because our visitor center is at that location at the end of Harbor Way,
Okay.
Along with the big Ford assembly plant. But the park itself is spread out across the city.
Okay. I know right
And
now there's
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say I could tell you a little more about that, which is our park is what's called a partnership park. So the sites that are part of our park are historical sites, but they're often in private hands. The trust owns one building, the Maritime Child Development Center. The Richmond Museum of History owns the Red Oak Victory Ship. There is a cafeteria building, and there are several buildings out at Shipyard 3 that are owned by the city, by the port. And then the Rosie Memorial, which is probably the most famous site and was the first site for the park, is in a city park down on Marina Way.
Okay. What's the purpose of the Rosie the Riveter Trust and its mission?
Rosie the Riveter Trust was basically set up before the park even came into existence. It was established about the time that the Rosie the Riveter Memorial effort was begun by two women here in Richmond, Donna Graves and Donna Powers. Really, Donna Powers was the person who led this. She was a city council member. And the trust was formed to try to help those folks put together an effort to recognize the women who worked in the shipyards here in Richmond. And then in the process, after it was established, it began to work very hard to designate historic buildings, preserve them, and to create the national park. So we ended up working with George Miller and others, and ultimately in the year 2000, the national park was established right at almost the same time that the Rosie the Riveter Memorial was established. The trust has been in existence ever since. And in the last few years, since we started working on opening the visitor center, we've been charged with trying to really develop the funding and the community support to expand the park's programs. And so our mission really is to try to preserve these resources and to educate future generations really about the kinds of changes that were so phenomenal during World War II and that have impacted all of us in many ways in terms of changing our society, our government, and the way we understand the workplace and the lives of women.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume you get quite a bit of field trips, schools coming by with students.
Oh yeah, we do. We do. We actually we do a lot of youth programming, and we have actually our visitorship has gone from 20,000 when we opened the visitor center to 70,000 last year.
Wow.
But it's amazing. It's really wonderful. But in addition to that, we've mounted an effort here in Richmond called Every Kid in the Park, which is part of a national initiative the Park Service has. But in our particular case, we've been raising transportation funding, and so we've been trying to bring 1,200 fourth graders a year to the park from schools that really can't afford to do field trips at all.
Wow.
So we've developed a fourth grade curriculum, and it's pretty great to see these kids come to the park and really explore and enjoy it.
I imagine. That's awesome, though. In your opinion, what's one of the biggest reasons why learning about Rosie the Riveter is so important for our society today?
Well, I think one of the things that always jumps out at me is that it was a time when people had many differences, as they do now, a lot of differences of opinion, a lot of differences in terms of ideologies. But it was a time when people realized they really needed to come together in a new way. And so I think it was one of the most interesting periods of our history because people banded together so strongly. And the process of doing it, they changed the way we do business. They changed the way we work. They created family-friendly policies. They initiated things. They innovated. Henry Kaiser was responsible for setting up child care centers that were family-friendly and had early childhood education. And it's a time that I think we need to look to really understand how important it is to maintain democratic values, to work together, and to try to change the way we live in society for the better every single day.
And for visitors coming by the visitor center, what can they expect? How do they get passes? And when they arrive, what can they expect?
You can come to the visitor center any day. It's open 7 days a week from 10 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, with the exception of, I think, 4 major holidays. And it's free. So that's one of the best kept secrets. You can come at any point. And we have lots of activities that are ongoing. We have a 48-seat theater. We show films on the half hour and a great variety of films, too. And we have periodic events with authors and with people who have special historical knowledge. And we also have plenty of docents and rangers to greet you and to just walk you through the exhibits and direct you to other parts of the park.
How big is the visitor center?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. I have no idea what the square footage is. It's not big. We had a lot of people packed into it last year at the Rosie Rally, but it's 2 floors. We did. It was hard to move. I'm sure it'll be like that again this year.
You didn't really pack 2,200 people into the visitor center, did you?
Yeah, not all at once. No. We got 2,200 into the Craneway, but I think maybe, I don't know what our capacity is, but I think 500 to 700 would be a crowd in the visitor center.
So you have various programs like the Rosie Girls. You mentioned the youth program. You mentioned local authors can come by. Do you have any other programs?
We do. I think, Rosie's Girls, I'll mention just that that's a summer camp, a 6-week summer camp, and we provide 30 free scholarships for girls who basically are from low-income families and qualify for the program. And it's unique in that we're trying to teach them how to take on big challenges and develop a big vision of who they can be in the future. So they learn welding, carpentry, and they go to Yosemite and learn outdoor skills for 4 days at the very end of the camp. That's a model for a lot of youth programming that we'd like to continue to do. We also do special programs for high school students. And then, the other things that we do are things like trying to preserve historic buildings and trying to educate people about what the buildings and the kind of history that's contained in these buildings, and the kind of the importance of some of these developments. As for instance, there's a housing complex here in Richmond called Atchison Village.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, you probably know, it's
Yep.
a great spot. It's now a member cooperative, but it was a model for wartime housing. And it was originally built by Henry Kaiser to try to deal with the fact that he had 100,000 people coming into Richmond and they had no place to sleep and no place to live. People were living all over the place in movie theaters and cars and everywhere else just to take these shipyard jobs. So we try and give people tours around the park. We have a once-a-month bus tour that you can hop on. You can go all around the city and see all of the different wayside exhibits and different historic buildings.
And that'll take you to the shipyard, McDonald Avenue, and the different historical markers?
Yes, it will. And then we do, and we'll also take you by the Maritime Child Development Center, which we can't take people to during the week because it's a living part of the park. It actually has an operating school in it. But we do take people there on weekends sometimes so that they can see what it was like when these child care centers were developed. And it right down to the tiny historic furniture that we have in our exhibit room there that was something new and innovative at the time, trying to make furniture small enough for children to feel powerful.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Henry Kaiser and his role. You've mentioned him multiple times, and he definitely had a significant role in this history.
Yeah, he certainly did here in Richmond. He was, I understand it, he was tapped by FDR to build ships as fast as they could possibly be built here in Richmond. He really was, I think, a seventh grade dropout, and his all of his experience before he came here was in building big dams. And so his work had been in concrete and big construction projects, but he'd never built a ship in his life. So if you come down to the visitor center, we have an interesting film and a display of how he developed a sort of a prefab ship that could be built in various sections on the land and then actually assembled by these giant things called whirly cranes in the dry docks and then welded together and then, basically launched in record time. They built one ship in just a little bit over 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it's astonishing to think about that and to imagine the kind of work that went into that. And he was a bit of a genius in terms of taking on this task and figuring out how to bring all the resources he needed to it, the people, the kinds of programs that would allow them to do the work so that they felt supported. And of course, out of it came ultimately prepaid health care because he provided health care for his workers. And after the war, was able to salvage the healthcare portion of it and turn it into Kaiser Permanente.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing, amazing story, and a seventh grade dropout too.
Yeah, the more I find out about him, the more fascinating he is as a person and as a person during that time period. Taking on the challenges that he took on. And we have plenty of exhibits that you can actually see in our display galleries that will tell you a lot about those things, ranging from the healthcare programs to the ways that he encouraged employee competition in building the ships. And we have a lot of interactive exhibits that can give you a feel for what it was like to be a welder in the hold or what it was like to put one of those ships together.
Amazing. And did he live locally, or was he basically tapped and flown in?
No, he came here. He was not here originally. He didn't live here, but he moved here. And I believe his house is in Oakland, his original house when he was here. And he basically started checking out, all of the logistics in terms of how they were going to build these shipyards and where they were going to locate their medical centers. We had our annual dinner last year at the Mira Vista Country Club, which
Okay.
I think has since changed its name. But since we try to do our fundraisers at historic sites, we were looking into the history of that building, and it turns out he even explored setting up one of his hospitals in that building up on the ridge, just because he was trying hard to find trying to find enough facilities that were big enough and complex enough that he could locate hospitals there. He ultimately didn't do it, but that building was one that was under consideration.
Wow. How many people do you have working over there at the visitor center and throughout the whole trust?
Well, we're pretty small. We managed to accomplish a lot. We have that we can do it spirit. And so the national park actually oversees 4 national parks here. So it's Rosie the Riveter, John Muir, Eugene O'Neill, and Port Chicago. And the Park Service has about 30 staff members who are doing that work. But we also have probably 80 to 90 docents, volunteer docents who work at the visitor center and help supplement the staffing. And then the trust is quite small. We're about a staff of about 2.5, but we have a board of directors of 10 and probably 20 to 30 people on various committees helping to support our efforts too.
Okay. And if someone in the general public wanted to volunteer, are there volunteer opportunities?
There are, yeah. We have some specific opportunities at the trust. If people were interested, they could contact us. They could go to our website at www.rosietheriveter.org and send us an email to info@rosietheriveter.org. We'd be happy to tell them about our volunteer opportunities and also refer them to the park because the park uses volunteers in lots of different ways as well. We also have a docent training once a year. So in the early spring, if you're interested in becoming a docent, it'd be a great time to try to contact the trust or the park and get on the list so that you could be included in that training.
Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit about the rally here. What's the exact date of the rally? I believe it's the 12th, correct?
It is Saturday, August 12th.
Okay. Do you have special attractions set up? What's a I guess typical day in this rally? I know it's the third one.
Oh, it's going to be fun. We've been trying to build this as an event that's more fun and more entertaining each year. So the morning consists of people going to the Craneway Pavilion in the Ford building, and we try to get people into the building by around 10 o'clock and into their seats by 11 o'clock, or into the count area where we try to set the Guinness World Record. We do have a program. We have entertainment during that period, a couple of musical groups that are playing. We have a couple of people who do some announcements, and then we do the official Guinness count, which takes about 5 to 10 minutes, so that they can make sure that they know exactly how many people are in that room.
That's all it takes? 5 to 10 minutes?
We videotape the whole thing, and yeah, it's quite orchestrated, because we have a steward who counts every 50 people and certifies that they're all dressed appropriately. And then we videotape the whole room so that they could actually see all the heads if they really want to double count them and make sure that we've got the right number. So it takes a while to get people into their places, but then with the count doesn't take long. After that, we tell people to join the procession outside, and we have some entertainment. We're going to have a parade going from the Craneway down the Bay Trail to Lucretia Edwards Park. And at noon, the Homefront Festival starts at Lucretia Edwards Park, and we're going to have just a lot going on. We've got food trucks. We'll have different vendors there, some vintage crafts. We'll have kids' activities. We have the FDR's yacht, the Potomac, will be docked right there at the Richmond Harbor Master Dock. We will have a section of cockpit, I believe, on a trailer that the USS Hornet is bringing over. Some antique vehicles and antique military vehicles, and things like the East Bay Regional Parks mobile unit with natural historians and interpreters. So the whole festival revolves around both World War II and parks themes, with lots and lots of entertainment and activities. And I did forget to mention that we also have an entertainment stage, which will have continuous music from noon on, and various acts and entertainment, and that is coordinated by East Bay Center for the Performing Arts for us.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's going to be a great event. It's going to be a great festival.
I think so. We had an awful lot of fun last year. People loved it, and so we're hoping we're going to have even more folks coming to see it and enjoy it this year. We had more food than we did last year. That was probably the one thing people were concerned about, that we had food last year, but there were lines to the food trucks. This year, I think we have almost 10 food trucks planned. And we have also options for people to come from places like Berkeley and from San Francisco via water taxi, because Tideline's water taxi is going to be running 2 boats to help get people over here.
Oh, that's awesome. Easy. Multiple ways to get there.
Oh, yes. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we are really encouraging people to take BART if they can. We have shuttles that'll be running continuously from BART, I think starting about 9 in the morning. And then we will have, and they'll take people down to the Craneway. That shuttle loop will also stop at Lucretia Edwards for the Homefront Festival, and then take people back to BART later in the day. And then we'll have another shuttle loop that will run from the Craneway out to the Shipyard 3 area and the Red Oak Victory Ship, because they're going to have some festival-related activities going on out there. And for people who don't know that area, there's a new winery out there too. So there's a lot going on. A lot of local businesses are participating, and it'll be a great day for people to spend touring around Richmond, enjoying the festival, enjoying the rally, and exploring some places maybe they haven't seen before.
Yeah. And for those driving, is there enough parking available?
Yes, we should have plenty of parking up and down Harbor Way. We've got parking lots and over toward Lucretia Edwards, but we're really encouraging people to BART, or if they do drive, to at least park in one place and not try to move around, to walk basically from the Craneway to Lucretia Edwards. There will be parking if they need to move, but it's best if you park and just enjoy the waterfront and take a hike down to the festival grounds. Also, too, we're going to have valet bike parking. So if people want to ride their bikes, that's another way to get there.
Oh, nice. You really plan for every possible way of transportation.
Well, we're trying. It's a national park, so we try to be really environmentally friendly, and we also have a lot of great partners involved in this event too. So the City of Richmond, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Museum of History, the Red Oak Victory. So it's a big collaborative event.
That's amazing. And is there a cost for any of this? I would assume, of course, food and some of the other some venues, but for the main rally, is there a cost?
No, there is. The only cost would be that if you want to buy Red Sox and a Rosie bandana, if you want to buy them early, you can come to the Visitor Center before Rally Day on the 12th and buy them at a discounted price for $8 for a rally pack, which includes your socks and bandana. On the day of the event, you can buy them at the Craneway for $10. And other than that, if you're interested in what to wear to qualify for the Guinness record, go to the Rosie the Riveter Trust website, and we have full instructions on what you should actually be wearing, because you do have to wear the right clothing in order to be able to be counted and to qualify as for Guinness.
Okay, great. So, how did this rally come about? How did it start? Where did the original idea for this come about?
Well, it kind of came out of the fact that we had done something called the Homefront Festival for several years, which was a celebration of homefront workers and original Rosies. And then it kind of tapered off and we decided not to do it for a couple of years. And then the folks in Ypsilanti, Michigan decided they wanted to get visibility for their restoration effort for their historic building. And so they set the Guinness record. And we had an aha moment and said, this would be a really fun event for us. So we started with the Rally and No Homefront Festival the first year, just trying to break the record and have fun doing it. And people loved it so much. We thought it was a great experience. It's really multi-generational, and it's so much fun to see all the different people who take part and bring their daughters and their granddaughters and their grandsons and everyone. And it was something we decided should really go on and be expanded. So we revived the Homefront Festival, and we're just trying to make it a bigger and more fun event every year.
That's great. That's great. How do you see it changing in the next few years? Do you have like a goal in mind of where you want to see this? I'm sure you like to break the record again and maybe even see a 3,000 figure.
Oh yeah, we'd love to see that, and we're hoping we'll get 3,000 or 4,000 people to come this year, because we really want to create the fun and the ambience and let people know that the park exists and this history exists and that Richmond is a terrific place to come and visit. We don't know yet. We have talked about trying to make it more of a citywide event potentially that becomes kind of a Richmond festival.
Hmm.
I don't know what we'll do with that, but this year we do have, as one little step in that direction, there is a special partnership that the Trust has with Mountain Hardware Friends and Family Store. So if people go in dressed as Rosie on the day of the event, it helps generate funding for the Trust and the park programs. But we've also reached out to other local businesses because people like to get something to eat after the rally, go around town, see what's going on here. So there's going to be a list of about 25 local businesses who are offering discounts of different kinds on the day of the rally. And there will be, I believe, on the Convention and Visitors Bureau website, and I think perhaps the city, there's going to be a downloadable app that will tell you what businesses are participating and what they're offering.
Wow. And that downloadable app will be for this year, correct?
Right. It'll be for this year. And we just kind of decided we would throw that out there, and there was so much interest that I think it'll be great because people can hop over to Point Richmond for a cup of coffee or go somewhere else for dinner or get out to one of the breweries that have sprung up in the last few years. And there'll be other businesses offering other kinds of discounts too.
Do you have a list of the business that are providing discounts on the website?
We don't, not yet, but I believe the Convention and Visitors Bureau might have theirs up. I'm not sure if they
Okay.
do.
Okay. What's the name of the app so that or is it live yet?
I don't know if that's even live yet. This is a big event, and we're all scrambling to get it planned. And this was a new idea this year, so I don't actually know whether it's up and running yet.
Okay. Well, definitely make sure to let us know when it's live, and we can link it up under the podcast description on Facebook too. And help you guys as much as we can. I definitely plan on being there on August 12th for the festival. It sounds like it's going to be an amazing time. I know you're short on time too, and I want to thank you for being on the podcast and for donations. Or why don't you go ahead and restate the website and where people can volunteer, donate, and we'll go ahead and provide the details for the festival.
Okay, that would be great. If people want to become members or support us in some way or find out what they should wear and what's happening on Rosie Valley Day, they can go to www.rosietheriveter.org. And that's the Trust website, and we should have all the information you need up there.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you, Marsha, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And good luck with the festival. And I hope you guys break 3,000 or 4,000.
Thanks. I hope we do too. I'm glad you're going to be there and help with the count.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
I really, really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.